No, I went to see one of my favorite bands last night. I went to see Placebo, and I hadn't seen Placebo live for years. And and I don't know if anyone here listens to Placebo. But I got into Placebo a long time ago because I became obsessed, absolutely obsessed with their singer, who I think is a genius. And also just, I mean, come on, one of the most beautiful men I've ever seen, even though he's tiny, 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 very tiny. Shauna says, I actually thought Porkfest was more degenerate than you're making it sound. Personally, I still wouldn't bring my kids if I had any, but honestly, it reminds me of a Ren Fair. Yeah, I don't know what a Ren Fair is, but I'll take your word for it, Shauna. So Placebo's been around for a really long time. Placebo's been around since the 90s. And this is the singer that I'm obsessed with. His name is Brian Mulco. And you know, I was a teenager in the 90s. So I remember how great 90s music was because it was awesome. And I remember, kind of like that angsty Gen X sensibility. And you know what else I remember is the Satanic Panic. Does anyone else remember the Satanic Panic? Primus is okay. I don't mind Primus. So one of Brian Molko's things, oh, Renaissance Fair. Yeah, I guess it is similar to a Renaissance Fair. So one of Brian Molko's things is he's very androgynous, and he was mentored by David Bowie. And they did like, they did a song together called Without You I'm Nothing. It's a great song. But he is extremely androgynous, and you can see in these pictures. And again, this is like 90s sensibility. You know what's funny is Brian Mulco came out at the show last night, and he said, and I think I might have this on video that I wasn't supposed to record, but I did, and I might show it to you guys if I can find it. But Brian Mulco came out at the show last night, and by the way, he's like 50 years old now, and he's still packing, clubs and stuff like that, and it's fucking great. He came out at the show last night and he said, "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone in between like me." And or he said something like, "And everyone that doesn't fall into one of those categories like me," something like that.
Thank you very much, Boston. Ladies, gentlemen, and those of you like myself who find yourselves somewhere in between.
And when he said that, my husband like shot me this glare. He's like, "Carlin, he's fucking non-binary." I was like, "No, no, no, you don't understand. This is just Brian Mulco's thing. Brian Mulco has always been androgynous. He's not talking about non-binary like queer Marxism. He's talking about like bi and androgyny from the 90s, back in the day when men dressed like this to be subversive." Does anyone remember this? You want to talk about your hate for drag queens? This is what men in the 90s were doing. See if we can find some other good pictures. Hang on. He wore dresses on stage all the time. The first single that they were famous for was called Nancy Boy. It's a great song. You should listen to it if you haven't. That's Brian Mulco. He's wearing a dress. There he is there. He's tiny, tiny, tiny guy. Emphasize says, weaponizing pacifism equals tyranny. This won't end well. I don't agree with you, Emphasize, but thank you for the super chat. I appreciate it. So you can see, this is what they did in the 90s. And I guess probably people freaked out. But I don't remember that. I don't remember people freaking out about this as much as they are about drag queens now. My gender is whatever Brian Mulco was in the 90s, early 2000s. I bring this up because Drag queens weren't the first men in dresses, guys. This is not new. It's not new. People have always played around with stuff like this. But what I never thought I would see is people claiming to believe that you own your body and you own your labor and your private property is yours over everything else, trying to control if a man wears a dress. Never thought I'd see this. It makes no sense. I am not in favor of children transitioning. I'm not in favor of anyone under 18 medically changing their gender. But I don't give a flying F if they want to experiment with the clothes that they wear or how they wear their hair or what they do with their hair, because guess what? Kids have always done that. It doesn't mean they're trans. But I'm going to get called the groomer for doing this because I'm like, I don't effing care if a woman at a campsite that she paid money for wants to host a man wearing a dress singing show tunes. I don't care. It makes no difference to me at all. I'm going to get called a groomer for saying that over and over and over again. In fact, I already have. Now, as someone who has actually exposed multiple instances of grooming in schools, exposed schools that are proactively implementing policies designed to groom students, as someone who has exposed actual fucking grooming, more than most people on the fucking internet, to have to be called a groomer every day of my life by conservatives and libertarians pretending to be conservatives, all of whom do nothing and focus on nonsense and whine and complain about drag queens at events that they do not have to bring their kids to, but do nothing, and I mean fucking nothing, to fight back against what is going on in the schools in any real way, and you still have the nerve to fucking scream groomer in my face? You don't care about grooming. If you are spending all of your days complaining about drag queens, you do not care about grooming. If you are spending your time whining and complaining over people hosting private events that you do not have to go to, then you do not care about grooming. If you are trying to take away the parental rights of people that disagree with you, that want their kids to go to a drag story hour, that want their kids to be educated like that, guess what? Parental rights for you mean parental rights for them. And if they want to fuck up their kids, that is none of your concern. Focus on your own kids. We are so fucked. And it is because this moral panic has taken over. Well, if I misunderstood, I apologize. But I agree with you that things are getting very bad and no one is doing anything. And part of the reason that we are so fucked is because people are more concerned about men wearing dresses singing show tunes at events that they don't have to go to than they are in actually doing anything that matters. And they think they're the good and the righteous, and they are truly convinced that screaming groomer in everyone's face is going to solve anything.